For the people that may be new to Zoom, just a quick rundown. You want to be on full screen. You can toggle off from a small screen to big screen. So get you on full screen first of all. And then there's another icon up there between speaker view and gallery view. You can toggle between the two. You want to be on speaker view. That puts me at this point in the big screen and the little icons of some of the people. If you want to see the whole group, you go to gallery view and you'll see 30, 40, whatever your computer has, people on the same screen, but they'll be pretty small pictures. The microphones are all muted because of the background noise. We want to try to keep that down. If you want to talk, there's a little microphone icon on there. You click on that to unmute yourself. Another way is if you're in a computer, you can hold the space bar down and it opens up your mic, and then you just release it when you're done talking, and you don't have to mute and unmute yourself. I really would welcome questions. Let's talk about an issue while I'm in the subject and not wait until the end to ask questions. So unmute yourself and yell at me, even right in the middle of a sentence. Just interrupt me. Questions are important. I want to address your concerns or comments about whatever piece of the puzzle I'm working on at the time. We're going to go to noon, and we'll have a break, a little 5-minute go get coffee break. It's really interesting with the Zoom. Breaks don't need to take 20 minutes or half hour like they do when we're in a regular meeting. We can get in and out with breaks pretty quickly. I think that's pretty much it for the new people. Let me do a little bit of an introduction. I started woodworking as a kid. My dad was a wood pattern maker, so I always had a shop near me. Got sawdust in my blood. I've had it forever. The turning came. I didn't do a whole lot of turning early on, and I really didn't have a chance to work with my dad as an adult because he died when I was in college. But the early foundation that he gave me of safety issues is carried with me through this whole time. A lot of what I teach, a lot of what I do is because of the safety issues. 1996, or excuse me, let's start 1988 was when I first found my little turning club up here in northern Michigan and saw what they were doing with the lathe, and I said, whoa, this is cool. I had no idea. My old methods of the lathe was scraping away with dull tools and trying to sand all the damage and doing pretty ugly things, but because I wasn't, I did a lot of woodworking and not a lot of turning. So in '88, and I saw what was happening with my local club, that was cool. So I dug a lathe out and started going, and got hooked. Both feet. Really is so much more fun turning than doing the other kinds of woodworking that I really was drawn to it right from the get-go. I learned quite a bit from my local club members, but I decided early on, because this is so much fun, that I wanted to do it right. I wanted to figure this thing out and not just have the trial and error of being self-taught. And so I went around the country and I studied with the best turners. I took classes from the best turners in the world, the masters in our field, and not only the best turners, but the best teachers that I could find in the turning world back then. And it was pretty difficult, pretty confusing at first. These masters were doing things that they needed to do their signature work, the things that they were well known for. and many times it's homemade tools and different methods that they were using to accomplish what they wanted to do. The other guy on the other side of the country would be doing something completely different, a different kind of artwork, different kind of turning, and he'd have different tools, different techniques for it. So so many different ways to skin this cat, and that's evolved even through today. There's so many different ways of doing these, uh, so many different methods and techniques that it's pretty confusing. Um, so I started to pick away. I started to take the cream of the crop, so to speak, from all these people, and started to put together a process. Back then, there was no network for these major turners to communicate with one another, to share their techniques and things. And there wasn't symposiums and forums and things like that. So they were doing things quite a bit different from one another. When I when I learned from them, it was all under the foundation that I'm basically lazy. I don't like to work hard. In the same sentence, I don't like the sand. And so when I found a method that was easier on my body, easier on the wood, easier on the lathe, no torn out grain, vibration issues, whatever it was, I'd always ask the question, why? Why is that easier than what I'm doing now? Sometimes I got somewhat of an answer, but a lot of times I got this kind of glazed over look that's, well, it's the way we're doing it. And that's the mantra. Even today, people will get into methods that they do when they first start and say, if it works for you, it's great, it'll go. And that's not all wrong. There's not a right and a wrong. There's not a correct usually. I mean, you can see some pretty strange things on YouTube, and some of it's pretty dangerous, but most of the time, the methods are different for different purposes. They're not right and wrong. And so we have to filter out some of that. And I do that by the why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Because the why is a much deeper understanding than the what or the how. And so I want to share with you the whys of what I do. So that's kind of what started in the early stages. Fast forward a bit, the next major year was in 1996. 1996, I started my torso series with the figurative sculptures, and I started the boring bar system with the laser. And prior to that, we were all sitting on the lathe and beating our bodies up with handheld tools. Fast forward from that, 2000, I gave up my day job, so I've been making a living at this for quite some time now. There's three elements to my income: the teaching, the tool sales, and the artwork. The artwork I have stopped marketing. I used to market my torsos to plastic surgeons, and the tool part of my business had been increasing so much, it was taking so much of my time that I didn't have time to put an inventory together to go to a plastic surgeons conference. So I haven't been marketing that, and that's just as well. I don't want to have to deal with 300, 400, 500-pound trees anymore. I'm still doing things on a smaller scale, but I'm not actively marketing my artwork now. Sell a piece now and then. But so if you would have told me, what, 35, 40 years ago that I was going to be a teacher, that wasn't in the thought process at all. Or when, I mean, I flunked speech class. I'm not going to get up in front of anybody and talk. That wasn't me. That's way beyond my comfort zone. But what brings me up here now is just the passion of the subject. After learning from all these people, I put a method together that's easy and safe and efficient. All of the methods work, but one of the key elements to my teaching is the versatility. The methods that I use open up possibilities. Limits and obstacles drive me crazy. And many of these methods, they work for certain kinds of things, but they don't work very well for a different kind of thing. And so I wanted a universal method that will work for anything, any kind of turning. So that's kind of what evolved over the years. I guess I forgot to give you a welcome to Michigan. Whoop, let me get my camera on the right place here. Okay. In fact, I can probably, now that we're started, let's zoom in just a hair. Whoop. All right, there we go. Okay. I'm way up in northern Michigan, up in God's country, where it's a resort area. Everybody goes to play, and I get to live there. I'm about as far away from Detroit as you can possibly imagine. When I was learning from all these people and working through a process, it's all about control. I'm a control freak. When we're in control, we're going to be working safe. No more catches. Catches should not be in our vocabulary. And when we're working safe, then that opens up the fun. When you walk into or step up to the lathe and you have this little fear in your stomach, oh, I'm going to take one more catch, one more cut, but what if I get a catch? Is that fun? We're not having fun that way. So when we're in control, the fun starts. And there's a whole nother level. If you're a beginner, this all starts gradually, but after a while, once you start to really get in control of your tool control, you don't have to think so much. The tip of your bowl gouge and cutters just become an extension of your hand. You don't have to think about it. It just becomes routine. And then that fun opens up a whole new world of creativity and design elements and things, possibilities of things that you can do that you could never do without control. And so we're going to talk about all of these methods. Let's get a piece of wood on here or talk about the wood for a second. Let's go with this camera. Okay. Got a chunk of wood here. It's a fairly large tree. This is a quarter of the tree that I just trimmed off roughly. It's sugar maple. Got some color in the middle where there was some spalting going on. Probably a critter or something was in there early on and started the center as a different darker color. But when I grab a piece of wood, I want to do a couple things here in the starting up process that's really important. And the first thing I want to do is I want to start between centers. Starting between centers. Why? Okay. First major region is a control issue. I just talked about control. I want to be in control of the access and orientation of this piece of wood. Many times we get sucked in, especially as some of the beginners, you get sucked in with, I've got a piece of wood that's 5 inches in diameter. By golly, I'm going to make a 4 3/4 inch vessel out of this. We get sucked into thinking about scale and size as an important issue. I want to change that focus. I want to change that goal to, I want to make the best piece I can out of this piece of wood, not the biggest. And so I want to take time to look at this and try to evaluate what's going on and use the information that we have to make the best. It can be grain orientation, it can be color, it could be a fault or a flaw that I might want to eliminate, or a fault or a flaw that I might want to have as an accent. I want to have an intentional void in my piece. Whatever, while I'm between centers, I can move it, I can tilt it, I can smooth it over, I can turn it all the way upside down as long as I'm between centers. So starting between centers opens up possibilities here. There's lots of different ways of starting here. One of the common ways is with a screw chuck, where you drill a hole in your bowl blank and you use a screw chuck to hang on to it, and you put the wood on there on your screw chuck. You're stuck on that axis for the duration. The roughing out process is information gathering. I want to do that on the lathe. I want to sneak up on this form and the color and the shape and the grain of the wood so that I can make the best piece I can out of it. So I want to be able to move it while I'm between centers. The second reason we need to be between centers is that I need to find a secure way to hang on to this. We're going to talk about chucking methods a little later, but we can't just screw a faceplate on here. We need to find a way to hang on to this wood, and I don't use chucks, so we're going to use a faceplate. We're going to prepare a concave surface for my faceplate. I can't just screw a faceplate on a chainsaw cut. We're going to have vibration issues. It's not safe. So there's only one lathe or one tool that we can use to prepare for my holding of a secure holding method, and that's being between centers on the lathe. All right, so if you agree with that and say, hey, that sounds like a pretty good idea, now I've got two options. I can grab my ruler here and measure this and find some kind of a geographical center point. Okay. If I try to put this on the lathe on a geographical center point with a wobbly, uneven surface, it's going to wobble on the lathe. The weight imbalance is going to mean that I'll have to have the lathe very slow, and then it's tonka to rough it out, and tonka is not safe, it's not fun, it's not easy, so I don't want to do that. I don't want to use a bandsaw either. That's another subject. Bandsaw is not a very safe tool for using for turning blank. A bandsaw is not designed to do wet wood. It's not designed to do big, thick wood. Unless you got this big hunkin' $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 bandsaw, it's going to be difficult to do that, and you're putting an odd piece on. So, and more important than the safety factor of a bandsaw is, back to my control issue, is that I don't want the bandsaw or a round blank to start to influence my axis or my orientation here. I want to do that on the lathe and look at what's happening as I rough this out. So I would never use a bandsaw. So if we start on the geographical center point, I'm going to be out of balance. My goal is to get the speed of the lathe up. Speed of the lathe is a good thing. Let me talk about that a second. Speed of the lathe is really important. I get the speed as fast as I can, and people will ask all the time, what's the RPM? Well, it's not the RPM, it's how fast the wood is going by your tool. So larger diameter versus smaller diameter, it's how fast the wood is moving, not the RPMs of the lathe. I want to get the speed up for two major reasons. There's more than that really, but two major reasons I want to get the speed up. When we're going slow, when we first start with the air spaces going by, and again, I don't use a bandsaw to get it round, so there's always air spaces going by. When I do a bowl, there's 4 distinct corners going by. So when I'm first starting, I need the speed of the lathe up to get past the air spaces. I'm going to go really quickly. The wood's going to go away and not bouncing into the air spaces. When the speed of the lathe is slow, you bounce into those air spaces. A tonka. You beat your body up. You beat the wood up. Stuff goes stripping off the lathe. It's not a fun thing, not a safe thing. So I don't want to go tonka. I want to get the speed of the lathe up in the roughing out process. All right. Now, when we get later on in the finishing process, another critical time when it's important to get the speed of the lathe up. The speed of the lathe going fast, the speed of my tool going across the tool rest, across the surface of the wood slowly, that's going to give me the best surface left behind that I don't have to sand very much. So that's one of the keys to preventing the torn out grain and having to sand so much, is the speed of the lathe fast and the pace across the surface slow. Okay, so there's another issue there that's not, it's just skipped my mind. We'll move on. All right, so the reason I'm going to get the speed of the lathe up, safety issue. Speed of the lathe now means that if you don't have all the other ducks in line, that something bad could happen. I guess something coming off the lathe at 500 RPM is going to hurt you just as bad almost as something coming off 1500 RPM. So speed of the lathe is not going to accentuate a bad situation, but we don't want to let the bad situation get in there. So we want to make sure that we've got all our ducks in line. We've got a very secure holding method to hang onto this piece of wood before we kick it up to a higher speed. And when we put our faceplate on, and or however we're going to hold these things, if I'm in a bowl, it's a glue block and a faceplate issue. I want to have a good transfer of power out to from the lathe to the wood so that there's no vibration and there's no risk of this ever coming off. Now, that doesn't mean that a piece of bark or a little crack of something could come flying off. And so that's always why we're going to wear a face shield. Whenever the lathe is on, we're going to have a face shield on all the way through the whole process. Okay, so we're going to get the speed of the lathe up, but we're going to do it safely and not have to worry about anything coming off. All right, let's go back to the top camera here. Okay. All right, so now instead of going on my geographical center point and having to deal with wobble tonka tonka, I'm going to find the balanced point on here. And I do this by going between centers again. And if you'll see this, if you can see here, this is a one-way drive center. And there are some others out there that have a set screw on the pin. And the pin now is out proud of the drive teeth. I've pulled it out a little bit so I can touch the pin while I'm doing my balancing without touching the drive teeth. If I touch the drive teeth, then it's got to move the bearings and motor and everything, and I can't balance it very well. So I want to touch just that little tiny pin on the drive side and the live center on the other side. So I don't think it matters which side I have up here at this point. So I'm just going to very gently touch this. I'll get my twist back just a little bit. There we go. Just very gently touch this. Oh, let me get the other camera in here for a second so you can see the bigger picture in the inset. There we go. In fact, let's get this maybe even a little bigger. We can get there. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to touch it on my drive center side and bring my tailstock up. Just touch it so it holds. Now I'm going to let go. Okay. What happens? The wood comes down here to the bottom because there's weight out of balance. Now I want to lift it straight up from there. I'm going to lift the headstock first a little bit. Touch it again. Oh, still weight in the bottom. Not good. And now I'm going to bring the tailstock up so this stays pretty straight. I can't just lift one side at a time and it get excuse me, get crooked. So tailstock comes up a little bit. Ooh, my lucky day. It only took me 2 movements and I'm there. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4. Wherever it set it, it stays. Now I'm on my balance point. Why am I going through this trouble? So I can get the speed of the lathe up. Okay. So now I'm going to lock the tailstock, lock the headstock. And I'm going to start to tighten this up. Tight, tight, tight. Tighten more. Get everything tight. Tighten, tighten, tighten. Uh-oh, drop my ruler. All right. Now I'm going to grab it and I'm going to try to move it. See, I can move it. All right. Not good. If it moves like that, what happens when I start turning? It's going to start to strip this and not be good. So, and while I'm moving it, I'm spreading those drive teeth and making them capable of driving deeper, right? So I spread it a little bit, tighten it back up, spread it a little bit again, trying to move them, tighten it up again. All right, now we're getting a good grip on it. Now I can't move it, okay?
Lyle, how wet is the wood that you're turning today? And would you do the same thing if this were dry wood?
Uh, Good question. Thank you. Yes, this is wet wood. It was cut down sometime in the winter, December, I think, and been sitting up here in northern Michigan frozen. So it's still got a lot of water in it. And I left it in a large, long length that didn't, and I cut away the dry pieces on the end that were starting to check and crack. So this is very wet. It's not dripping wet like you're going to make a mark on my ceiling, but it's pretty wet. I use the same method for dry wood. Um, if it's a really hard wood, an exotic or something, this is sugar maple, which is pretty hard, but it's not, not too hard. You could take I don't have a extra one here. You could take a chisel and make some hash marks so that uh, that you'll have a place for the drive teeth to hit, or you take a saw and cut a kerf of a hash mark so that the drive center will sit in if it's dry wood, and then you can still do this, still get it good and tight, but you need to have some place for those drive teeth to bite into. If it doesn't naturally want to go into the dry wood, then you've got to create uh, a holding method that's going to be safe for this. Okay, good question. Thank you. But I use the same method for dry wood or wet wood. I had a question last night in my other demo about a two-prong drive. I don't want to use a two-prong drive for this because a two-prong drive becomes a splitting maul. It'll drive deep, deep, deep into the wood, and it could split, and it's causing damage down deeper in the wood than what you would want. So don't use a two-prong drive, only a four-prong, or Robust has got the round cup drive that I like too. So, but we need to get a good grip on it, whether it's wet or dry. Thanks for a good question. Did I answer that? Okay, think so. All right. Now we've got her tied on here. I'm going to put the tool rest so it's, let me get the right camera on here. There we go. I'm going to put the tool rest so it's very close to the wood. When I turn it on, it's going to be a blur. I won't be able to see the wood. So by having the tool rest close, I know where the wood is. Right there. All right, tighten everything up. All right, I'm going to start her slowly, and I'm going to ramp it up, make sure there's no vibration. We're doing good. All right, so I'm up there probably 1400 RPM, something like that. Okay, I want those air spaces to go by quickly. All right, let's get turning. All right, my bowl gouge. I use a deep fluted bowl gouge. This is my signature gouge, a parabolic flute, and I've got a 60-degree grind on it. I started that with David Ellsworth. A lot of my bowl gouge techniques came from David, and his grind was what I started with. So a 60-degree grind at the tip is there because of its versatility. Some people like the 40-40, the steeper grinds, but there's some limits that can't do. So the 60 grind is more versatile, the blunter grind. My wings are peeled back about 3/4 of an inch from the tip. Some people, and David is one of them, has a hump on his grind. I have chosen to take the hump off and have a straight line from the tip all the way down to the wing. The hump, David uses the hump for a specialty cut that he does on the inside of the bowl that I don't do, and so he needs the hump. But the hump gets in my way. The hump, 3 out of the 4 cuts that I do with a bowl gouge, the hump is an obstacle. So I decided, okay, let's take the hump off. And so it's a straight line, all right? Now, Jameison rule number 1. I want to make a cut into the side of the tree. When I make a cut in the side of the tree, I'm going to peel off a shaving. If I turn around and go the other way and make a cut on the end grain of the tree, I'm going to make sawdust. It's going to be easier to take a cut into the side of the tree than on the end of the tree. So my cut is going to be this direction. I'm going to make notch, 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 notch across here because it's easier than going back and forth across the tool rest and fighting to some extent the end grain. I mean, the sharp tool is harder than wood. It'll cut that way, but it's more efficient if I can go into the side of the tree. All right, so let me get my face shield and make some shavings happen here. Let's see, is my, yeah, I think we're, you can see my handle. Yep. I'm going to, for fun here, just to show, I'm just going to use my fingertips, right? Anchor, bevel is going to line up, so I'm going into the side of the tree, and let's make a cut with just my fingertips. And it doesn't get much harder than this with those air spaces going by there, right? All tunka tunka rapidy rap. All of the forces of the cut are being absorbed by the lathe and the tool. I don't have to work hard. This is a finesse thing, not a strength thing. All right. So now I'm going to tuck this into my waist and get my bevel lined up. I'm going to go a little bit deeper here. Now this is very easy. Every bit of the cutting action has the bevel supported against the wood while it's cutting, even though there's air spaces there. But I'm not bouncing into the air spaces. I'm making the cut. Now this says this is so easy. Let's do it bigger. Do it faster. Okay, you go to the bandsaw and get it round. We'll see who gets there first. And who's having more fun? I'm having fun on the lathe, not a bandsaw. All right, let's take a quick look at this. Still got some of the color still left in there. Still got a little bit of bark left in here, but I'm not seeing anything that I'm worried about. No cracks, no problems involved. All right, so now I want to clean up both ends. Give myself information, make sure this is a safe piece of wood. Now, did you notice anything? Look at my pace across the surface, very slow. All right, why am I going so slow? Because I want to have a very clean surface. This is all in grain. I want to have a clean surface so I can see if there's any faults or flaws. And I'm going to use, Cindy Drozda has a little magnetic light that she has that's really cool, and I think she's almost giving them away about 29, 30 bucks. Got them in my website too, but it gives us some sharp light that we can look at this. And so what am I looking for? All right, the pith is gone and there's no cracks. That's a good thing. If there's cracks in this, it's firewood. All right, so we're good to go there. Let's do it on the other end. Again, a very slow pace across the surface. No pith, no cracks. I got to this point about a week ago in one of the demos that I did, and there was a ring shake in here that I was really hard to see, and want to make sure that it's good and nothing bad can happen here. All right. Now, we have a chance now, while in between centers. I can move this if I want to. If I was really concerned about keeping this color, I've got some bark over here and I wanted to keep this color. If I take this all the way down so that the bark goes away, the color's going to go away. So I could move the whole piece over and let it wobble. So I take the bark and don't cut this. So I could move it all over. I could tilt it if I want the grain orientation to be lined up. If there's a fault or a flaw, I might have a branch or something up here that would be in the top of my vessel and say, uh-oh, I don't want that. I could reverse it so that it's in the waste wood, or I could keep it, turn it upside down. Lots of things that we could do if we find something that's interesting. I'm not going to move it now, but the message is that we can. And when we're doing this balancing to get the starting point, we have to realize that's not usually the final axis. The balance point starting point is only to get it roughed out, and then we're going to move it to where we want it to get, again, the best piece, not necessarily the biggest piece. Okay, so done that. We'd move it if we wanted to. I think, look at here, almost instinctively, I was going to go back and prepare for my faceplate. Maybe see that? I've got a little reveal there where it's got a concave surface. I want the faceplate to seat on the rim and not have a hump in the middle. A hump in the middle would cause a vibration issue. All right, so let's talk about chucking a minute. Okay, I'm going to use a faceplate. Lots of holes in it. So if you decide to use this, you got to go dig through your old dusty drawer and find your old faceplates you've never used. Sometimes you find one with only 3 or 4 holes in it. Just go drill some more holes in it. A regular hand drill with a drill in it a high-speed steel drill will make holes in it. So make more holes. Doesn't have to be machined by some kind of machinist. Many holes. Now that faceplate is going to seat on the edge, on the rim, because we made that concave surface. It's a shallow funnel, not really concave, a straight-sided shallow funnel to make sure that it seats around here and I don't have a hump in the middle. It's going to cause vibration. Okay, let's see this. Yeah, oh, let me get that other camera out of the way.
Can you hear me?
We have a question there.
Yeah. The faceplate's going to seat properly if it's centered, but if your goal is to shift the center point, then it's not going to. It's going to wobble on the surface that you've machined. Is that right?
You're exactly right. Yes. When I first put it on between centers on the balance point, I chew it up and get it roughed out to some extent, and I decide, okay, I want to move it. Now it's going to wobble. I take it down some more. I rough it out some more, get it down to where I want it. I'm going to observe it, take a look at it. I find something new. I'm going to move it again. It's going to wobble. I'm going to take a little bit more wood off, get it round again. And you don't move it big increments. If you want to change the axis significantly, you're going to move it in small increments. You don't do it all at once. Otherwise, it'll too much wobble will be too hard on everything. The lathes start to vibrate and whatever. So, yep, it'll wobble. You true it up again. You know, you remember where we're at here. We're in the roughing out stage. There's no finished shape here. There's no we're not anywhere near our wall surface of any kind of a vessel. Okay, that makes sense?
Orientation is all determined before you put the faceplate on.
The axis is determined before we, that's a great way, thank you. That's a great way to put that. The axis is determined before we put the faceplate on. Exactly. Once we put the faceplate on, then we're stuck with that. We can't move it. Once we put that screw chuck in there, we're stuck with that. We can't move it. So I want to look at this, observe, figure out the best possible scenario, and get it where I want it. Then I'll put my faceplate on and get it down to my finished wall. Good way to put that. Thank you. Okay. Chucking methods. Let's put in here a bowl blank, okay? For math purposes, let's call this 10 inches in diameter. I think it was Dale Nish that coined the phrase or started the rule of 40% rule. The holding surface, chuck, faceplate, whatever, needs to be 40% of the bowl, of the vessel, right? So what's 40% of 10? That means this tenon is 4 inches in diameter, or your faceplate. Now, 10-inch bowl, that's not a very big bowl. It's a standard bowl. A lot of people do 10-inch bowls, right? What's the 4-inch rule? Means that we have to use jumbo jaws if we're going to use a chuck. How many people use standard jaws for a 10 or 12-inch bowl? Really routine, okay? You're exceeding the limits of your chuck and the power of that to hold on to it, all right? I don't use chucks. I never use chucks. I wouldn't even have a chuck in here. The only reason I do have a chuck is that one came with one of the lathes that I bought one time. Otherwise, I would have never purchased a lathe. Way back 35, 40 years ago when I first started turning, I realized the chuck was a limiting factor. Remember my mantra, limits and obstacles drive me crazy. I don't want anything limiting what I can do. A chuck is a limiting factor. It's not that a chuck fails. A chuck's a wonderful instrument, but we're grabbing a sponge. And when we compress those fibers, it's not a very good way to transfer the power from the lathe out to the wood with no vibration. Talk about vibration again in a minute, but vibration's the enemy. We don't want to go there. I never use a chuck because of its limits. If you want to use a chuck, have to understand what the limits are. And there are a lot more limits than what you first would realize. If you're going to do a hollow form, never use a chuck. If you decide you want to use a chuck anyway for other things, fine. But in a hollow form, never use a chuck for a hollow form, right? You know, all the way out here like this, and I'm going to do a vessel out here, all the way out so far away from my support that a chuck's not going to be the best way to hold it. When I'm doing a bowl, look at how close my cutting action is from my holding method, relatively close. Now what happens when I go out here and I start to hollow, or I'm working on the outside even on a hollow form, you're too far away from your support and a chuck's going to fail you. All right, how do you fix that? I got vibration issues. I decide I'm going to use my chuck anyway, and I got vibration issues. How do I do that? Okay, a standard method. Sometimes famous people use the method of using a steady rest. Okay, steady rest to hold this up. Why are they going to use a steady rest? Is because they've got a weak holding method. I want to prevent the vibration rather than try to fix it. The fix has unintended consequences. The steady rest has limits and obstacles that I don't want to have to deal with. What if I've got voids in here? What if it's a very thin-walled vessel that I'm going to pierce? Natural edges, other things. I have to make a race here for the steady rest to sit on. It can't go on a curved surface or an angled surface. Lots of things that your design and creativity gets stifled because you're using a steady rest. So I prefer to prevent that vibration problem by having a good chucking method. And we'll talk about that vibration a little bit in a minute. But so I'm suggesting don't use a chuck. Well, you've all got chucks sitting around. You got thousands of dollars of chucks. You're probably still going to use them, but understand their limits and don't use them for hollow forms. Okay, you really got one hand tied behind your back. With a faceplate, you can do things taller, bigger, faster, easier, safer. All right, let's go about safety again. I can't see how many we got in here. We got 76 people. I can't see all your hands, but You don't have to raise your hands, but let's take a poll, just a fictitious poll. How many people out there using chucks have ever knocked something off a chuck? A lot of hands are going to go up. How many people out there have ever knocked something out of axis in a chuck and have to go back and reposition it and everything? A lot of hands go up. How many people use the tailstock just because they know that the chuck is a weak way to hold on to the wood and they don't want anything bad to happen, so they're going to use a tailstock for support? A lot of hands go up. How many people have ever knocked anything off a faceplate? Ain't going to happen. All right. So let's be smart about this. Let's think about what we're using in our startup and our chucking methods can really, again, most of these techniques that people are using, and there's a variety of techniques. You got 70 people in here. There's 100 techniques going on. They all work. Most of them all work. They work fine, especially in the beginning stages. When people are first beginning, almost any kinds of methods, any kinds of tools, you can use easy rougher scrapers or whatever and get away with it, and everything works fine. Okay, then after a while, they get some experience at the lathe and they start to get some skill level up, and they realize that most of these tools don't work very well, and they start collecting dust. And I want to explore some more advanced things. Now that's where the methods can get in the way. A chuck will work for small things, but I want to do something big. Okay, well, the chuck's going to get in the way. Where do you draw the line? Where's the line in the sand that says I can use a chuck and I can't use a chuck? That's a pretty fuzzy line, so I just say, I'm not going to use it. Okay, it's a stronger way to hang on to wood than chucks. So, all right, my 2 cents on chucks. Let's go back to getting this thing on the lathe here. So I'm going to move this camera here a second. Hang on. All right, let's go to camera 2. So I made my concave surface. Now, if this was a taller little nub here, I should carve this off, but it's small. It's going to sit inside here, so it's not going to bother me. It's not going to hit my spindle. I'm going to leave it. All right. Kind of screws we use are important. We use sheet metal screws. This is number 12. Number 12 because it changes to a 3 Phillips pan head sheet metal screw. Only needs to be 1 1/4 inches long, but I need a lot of them. I just did a YouTube clip, I think last Tuesday, about using, my wire's in my way, about using a trick for using, my impact driver's over on the other side of the shop. Hang on a second. I got to walk in front of the camera. I did a YouTube video about some tricks about preventing screws from stripping when we're going into ingrain, because we're in ingrain, it'd be easily stripped, and that's one reason why we use the sheet metal screws instead of wood screws. They're sharper screws to get in here. Alrighty, let's get this baby on here. right, well, I'm going to make some of you squirm a little bit here because I'm going to waste some wood away. I'm going to make a smaller vessel here. It'll only hurt for a little while. This stuff grows on trees. We're going to see how it's wobbling a little bit. I don't know if you see it in the camera or not. Got a little bit of wobble to it because I wasn't really lining it up perfectly, and it didn't matter because I'm still roughed out here. So let's just get this down into a smaller vessel so I don't have to spend so much time hollowing for you. Still straight into the side grain again. Let me get this top cleaned up. Now let's take a look, make sure I didn't find something strange in here that I need to deal with. I'm going to have still some color left on here. That's cool. Everything's clean, no cracks, no pith. All right, I'm good to go. Okay, now let's make a little bit of a shape here quickly. All right, all that was done really quickly. I guess I could have, let's zoom in just a little bit here. Oop, not that much. There we go. So I got the waste wood away quick, and I got the shape kind of outlined with the cuts going straight in to the side of the tree. That's the fastest, easy way to do it. Now I'm going to start to shape it, and I need to use grain orientation. Grain orientation is critical. Grain orientation is something that isn't taken seriously enough sometimes. I see some famous turners going the wrong way to the grain sometimes, and it's really confusing. But in a spindle mode, when the tree is growing this way, we have to go from large diameter to small, large diameter to small, large diameter to small, okay? I can't go down the side of one cove and back up the other side, or I'm going to rip out the grain. All right, we need to go downhill to the fibers. Each one of those little fibers are like a straw, and we need to go downhill, supported fibers. If we go the opposite way, we're going to tear it up a little bit on our way by. So I want to always use that advantage of always going the right way. So that means here that I have to go from large diameter to small, large diameter to small. Okay. So now anchor bevel cut, I'm going to get my bevel on the wood first. That means my handle is way back over here and the bevel is on. No cuts being made because the bevel's there. Now I'm going to swing my handle away a little bit and just start to get a little bit of a shaving. There we go. And start to make my cut. Slow pace across the tool rest again. Across the surface. Let's make that a little bit more bulbous here. Swinging my handle to make a curved line. When I'm on here, look at this front hand. Front hand doesn't do anything. The bevel is carrying it across that surface. This front hand only controls the pace. The handle hand steers that bevel down the side, in this case, of the cove and across. All right. I'm going to clean this up a little bit here. Now let's go the opposite way. We're going to go the opposite way down the other direction. Just catch these little corners first. Start over here. Swinging my handle. If I don't swing the handle, I'm going to make a straight line. Swing the handle, make a curved line. Okay. I want to do the little, I'm going to take a little bit of this corner off here, going downhill this way a little bit. I'm going to soften that corner a little bit. All right. Stop and take a look. Make sure I didn't reveal anything that's a problem. Observe what's going on. Ah, there. Nice, cool little patch. Everything's great. Got a few little tool marks here, but we're going to fix that with shear scraping. I'm going to shear scrape with a bowl gouge. Let me see if put this camera back where it belongs so we can see me. And put it in here. All right, yeah, that works. All right, shear scraping. I want to scrape. I'm going to close the flute now and not have any bevel support. And I want to scrape, but I want to scrape on a steep angle, so I'm going to lower my handle, right? When I lower my handle, on especially on hollow forms like this, what happens? My bed gets in the way. I can't do that. And so now we have to raise the handle up so that we get by the bed. Now we're not shear scraping, shear meaning steep angle. We're scraping, and that's going to start to fuzz some stuff up or rip it up. So I want to shear scrape. I want to scrape at a steeper angle. Now, I used to have with the parabolic flute, the only place that you could get it was Sheffield, England, and they always had wood handles. But now that I got Dub Thompson to make my bowl gouge for me, I use for shear scraping, take the handle off. Now the handle's not going to hit the bed or the headstock. There's lots of places where the handle can get in the way when I'm shear scraping. And shear scraping is such a delicate cut that don't need a handle on it. It's a finesse thing. It's very delicate. So I'm going to lower the handle. We can't really see it in the other camera, but so we can get rid of that now. All right. Lower the handle, close the flute. And now we're going to clean this up. My goal when I get done with the outside of my hollow forms is to start sanding with 320 grit. 220, 320. My students do it here all the time. Delicate cut. I don't know if you can see it in the camera here. Little tiny angel hair shavings. Okay. All right, I got a little bit of a reveal here going this direction. Now, why am I doing it with this way is that angle, that slicing angle, is peeling the fibers downhill. Okay. It would be a lot easier if I did it this way, right? But now I'd be sucking the fibers uphill. That wouldn't be good. So I want to make sure the fibers are being cut downhill. Right here is neutral, right at the tip of the largest diameter. So, all right, let's go back the other way. And finish this. Now here's where I would spend some significant time. Want to go over this. Make sure there's no little humps and bumps, no tool marks, no torn out grain. So I'd feel that surface and look at it and watch the shape develop, and I'm in good shape. I don't know if you can see it in the camera. There's a little line here. Because of the waste wood that I've left behind here, I can't finish that off with shear scraping because this is in my way. So I'm going to take a spindle gouge now. Why spindle gouge? Because my spindle gouge has a steeper angle. That steeper angle is going to cut a little bit cleaner than the blunter angle. So I want the best cut that I can possibly get. And I'm just going to take this last little ½ inch here that I can't reach with shear scraping and finish that arc. Bevel support first. Pick up a little shaving. Follow it through. Swing my handle forward a little bit, making a curved line. Very nice. All right. So let's get back to the drawing board here and show you my game plan. What I just did there is stage 1. Stage 1 is on the outside. Get it all finished and perfect because I'm not going back. Once I start to hollow, it's going to start to get thin and vibrate and whatnot, so I can't go back. So I want to make sure it's perfect. Then I'm going to go hollow out inside here. Second stage. Then I'm going to go back out and finish stage 3, the last part of the outside. And then stage 4, finish hollowing the inside. All right, now this is a little tough for beginners because we can't do the vessel all the way down to a small foot and go out and hollow. It's going to vibrate. So we have to mentally, visually extrapolate that line in the waste wood, trying to figure out where the bottom is going to be, or at least visualize what the shape of the bottom is going to be. We can only do the top half first. We can't do it all. There's a lot of people that will do a whole vessel all the way down because it's easier to see the design if we do the whole outside first. And then how am I going to hollow? I got to go put a steady rest on it. Again, not my favorite thing. With the limits and obstacles of a steady rest, I choose not to use that. The steady rest is my last resort, not what I usually use. So I want to, again, prevent that vibration. Let me take a minute and talk about just vibration. There's 3 categories. There's 3 things that can contribute to vibration. And vibration's the enemy. We can't go there. When you start to get vibration, it's never going to get better on its own. It's always going to get worse. It's not fun. It's not safe. Something very bad can happen with vibration, so you don't want to go there. So I choose to prevent it, again, instead of trying to fix the problem. So we need to understand the 3 kind of things. Okay, the first thing we talked about, the chucking method, can be a weak link. Okay, and that can be, part of that can be even your lathe. If you've got a Delta lathe, I used to have an old Delta, a full-size lathe, but a Delta with a 1-inch spindle. I replaced the bearings on it 3 times before I realized it wasn't the bearings. I was trying to do things that were too tall, too big for a 1-inch spindle. The spindle and the bearings aren't strong enough to carry the load, the forces involved when we start to do taller things. So we can't exceed the limits of our tools in our chucking method is one of the first issues. The second thing is that I was just talking about here is you make a small foot and go out and hollow. The wood itself can flex. Show you another example of that. Let's say we're going to do a goblet. Okay, I have to have a mass of wood here to hang on to so that I can go and hollow the goblet. I can't take it down to a stem and then go hollow it. It's going to vibrate. So I take it down in small stages, do the hollowing first, and then get down to the stem, and then I take it down in the stem in small stages. I can't get it down here and then go back, right? The wood's going to flex, so I can't allow that. And I don't want to have to use a steady rest as the crutch because the fix because of the limits that the steady rest has. Okay. First thing is the chucking method can fail. Second thing, the wood can flex. The third thing is that the tool itself can start to flex and vibrate. When it's dangling off the tool rest so far, it starts to flex and vibrate. Okay. That would be in the bottom part of the vessel where you're trying to go with a tall vessel and the boring bar is not heavy enough to absorb that stress. If you want to do something bigger, you have to go with a bigger bar. The larger diameter now can dangle off the tool rest further without flexing and vibrating. So we can't exceed the limits of our tools. And that goes back to spindle gouges and bowl gouges, especially bowl gouges, but sometimes spindle gouges can get in the way. In fact, I'm the first one to have Doug Thompson make a big hunkin' 5/8 inch spindle gouge, because when you dangle over a tool rest very far, and sometimes it's on an angle and in hard to reach places, and you're dangling off the tool rest, even a spindle gouge and a bowl gouge starts to vibrate. When you get that little whining, that little whining sound, and a little washboard left behind on your surface, the tool itself is flexing and vibrating. So I don't have any use for smaller tools. I can do little things with a big tool. It's the angle that gets me into the details, not the size of the tool. So I can do little things with a big tool, but I can't do big things with a little tool. It's going to vibrate, cause limits. Limits. I don't like limits. Okay. So we want to stay away from vibration at all costs. All right. Even though we can't do the whole shape, we're not doing the whole shape because of the vibration issue. Okay. So we've got one done. We're going to go to step 2 and we're going to start to hollow this. I'm going to use going back there. I'm going to use a drill to drill a drill hole in here. And where's my, here we go. I'm going to use a pointy little scraper, just an old Sears all high-speed steel scraper, whatever, that has a point on it. And I'm going to make a little recess in there where there's a cone shaped in here. And then the drill, when it starts drilling, will self-center itself before it starts drilling and try to stay on. Drill wants to wander, and if we can start it off on center, it'll wander less, not be as much of a problem. Let me move the camera over a little bit, even though you're still looking at it, but there we go. Try not to move the camera when you're looking at it, make you dizzy. Okay, so we make that little cone. Okay, now I'm going to take a drill. It's just a drill with that I epoxied on a handle. Right, one of the long drills. You can get those at like Ace Hardware stores, has the long drills. Okay, now the drill is not a depth gauge. I don't know where my bottom is going to be. It's in here someplace. I won't know until I do the stage 3. So I've made some really ugly vessels because my drill hole was too deep, and all of a sudden I got done with stage 3 and I said, uh-oh, my drill hole's in there. What am I going to do now? I put this ugly foot or something on it. But so the drill hole is not a depth gauge. I want to drill this drill hole to help me enter my hollowing, but I don't want to drill it to the bottom. I want to leave it short and leave it half inch, 3/4 up from the bottom of where I think my bottom is going to be, because I really don't know until I finish that other stage. So I'm going to come in here just a little bit more. Got a little rubber O-ring on here to give me a stop point. Okay. And if you wanted to put a Forstner bit or something in your tailstock, use a Jacobs chuck or whatever, that's fine. I'm just doing it by hand here. It's quick and easy. All right, very gently start into that little cone before I start pushing. And now I'm pushing, and you see it's wobbling a little bit already, but it'll always wobble a little bit. It wants to take the path of least resistance. It's wobbling quite a bit. Okay. Now we're going to get the boring bar on and do some hollowing, but this is a good time to take a little break. Let's try to make it just 5 minutes or so. Go grab a cup of coffee. Think about some questions. We've covered a lot of territory here. Any other questions that we might want to do while we're mid-range? Questions are welcome. Been kind of quiet. Nobody's interrupted me so far. So please, anything that you want to chat about, let's get it out and try to get some questions after the break. So take a quickie, and we'll see you in a minute.
Hello? Hello, who's this?
Lyle,
Yes.
when you get to the bottom of your vessel, what tool do you use to get away from the tear out in the bottom? That's what I experienced when I made this mug.
If you don't mind, let me cover that when I get there, or I'm going to cover it in two different ways. When I first start, I'm going to show it, and then we'll do it in the bottom. It's wonderful, but I want to answer
No,
that
I
question.
understand.
I want to
I
answer
just wanted to bring that question up.
Yep. I want to answer that question so everybody can hear it when everybody's back. If I don't, by the time I get done into the bottom, if you have more clarification, please stop and interrupt me again. But I'm going to answer that in two different ways in the middle of it. So if you'll just postpone the answer on that, we'll get to that. Great question, though.
Thank you. I'm experiencing that with another vessel that I made, and got to the bottom, and I got a lot of tear out.
What boring bar are you using?
Well, what I did is I took it down with a Forstner bit, but then when I got to the bottom, I was basically scraping it. So I'm
With what, a handheld scraper, you mean?
yeah, to clean out the bottom. I
Like easy
basically
rougher
did-
carbide or the high
It
speed
was a
steel?
carbide. It was a carbide.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, let me address that the carbide cutter because I'm not going to get into that really in the demo part. But
Okay.
those easy rougher big carbide cutters are the old carbide. The particulate carbide is a powder, and the particulate is so big that they're not very sharp to begin with, and they don't stay very sharp. And so you're actually doing two things wrong in the bottom there. You're scraping, which is going to rip stuff up, and you're scraping with a relatively dull tool is going to rip stuff up more. If you want to scrape, you need a sharper tool with a nice burr on it. A high-speed steel cutter is going to be much better than the easy rougher type tools.
I continue to put them on a 1,000 grit bar. Continue to polish them to keep them sharp. Doesn't do it. Huh?
Yep.
Okay.
You need a magnifying glass to see what's going on there, but the edge, the particulate of the carbide is so big that the edge never gets sharp. You can hone it all day long. It's not going to make any difference. The particulate of the carbide isn't structured well enough to make a very sharp edge.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you about the faceplate. When you turn a large platter or a large bowl, do you use a faceplate when you turn it around after you turn one side?
Okay, I'm looking at the gallery view here. It looks like most people are back on board again. So yeah, good. Let's go ahead and take these questions.
Oh, okay.
I got my mouth full of a candy bar though.
Lyle, how about a step center at your very beginning of turning, when you were centering the log using a step center?
Okay, we got two questions there. I don't want to get shortchange either one of them here, but okay, step center first. I'm not going to use a step center. What's a step center for? It's for spindle turning, that when you get a catch, the wood's going to stop and spin. I'm not going to get a catch, and the wood doesn't. I don't want the wood to stop and spin. So a step center is not a good, efficient way of handling the wood. Okay. The other question, going back to, you covered a lot of territory in that question. I don't know where to begin really. You're implying that you're going to finish the outside of the bowl first, and you're going to reverse it
Correct.
and do the inside of the bowl. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I don't do that.
Okay.
That's
What do you do?
that's not a very efficient way. What happens when you reverse it? I don't care if you're using a chuck or a faceplate or a glue block or whatever it is, you'll never get it back on perfectly true again.
Mhm.
It's always going to have a little bit of wobble. So why did I finish it to begin with and turn it around and have wobble? I got to finish it again, or I have to live with the fact that it's not running real true. And then I make my inside. If I'm going to make an inside wall thickness that's pretty thin, if I'm a 1/16 of an off when I'm only an 1/8 of an inch thick and I'm a 1/16 off, that's a lot. So I choose to do both the inside and the outside on the same chucking method. Just as I'm doing in a hollow form here, I'm going to do it all on one chucking method. And I cover that, excuse me, I cover that in my bowl demo, and that's something that you might want to do down the road, is have me back again to do my bowl demo, where I cover the bowl gouge uses and how to deal with that. Most people have a hard time when the bowl is in its finished location doing the undercutting the bottom, and doing the bottom, it takes a separate, a different cut, a pull cut that we need to learn. So the short answer is I don't do the outside on one axis, turn around, do the inside on the other axis. I do both the inside and the outside of the bowl on the same chucking method. Did that answer the question?
It did. Thank you very much.
Hey, Lyle, I'd like to ask Mike Nathal a question real quick. Mike, do you have the link for the ALS auction, which is tomorrow? And do you know what time it is? If you don't have it, I can send it to you, and you could send out an email after the meeting.
ALS auction will go for a week or so. So, and if you go to the ALS website, it'll send you right there. Actually, it's actually going on now. There hasn't been many bids put in, but.
Lyle, I noticed as you were about, Lyle, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I noticed as you were about to plunge your drill bit into pour out that center, as you were approaching it, you had your left hand on the flutes. Have you ever had a problem with that? Because I had a student quite a few years ago that almost ripped up his palm when that drill bit bound.
Yeah, I guess I've done it a million times, and I know I have to hang on to the handle, and it's not going to spin. Now, if you're using a Jacobs chuck or using your tailstock and you do that, the Morse taper is apt to give loose, and that drill can spin in there. You don't want to be touching those flutes. But the way that I'm doing it, something would have to break or go really crazy in order to have that spin around in there. So you're absolutely right, though. It's not a good place to put my fingers, but I really had I don't have any worry about it or any thought about it. So I got a little careless there, probably, and should not put my fingers there. But in my case, I was doing it so routine that I didn't the risk there would be minuscule.
Okay, I don't think you're going to spend any time in purgatory for it. So
good point, though. No, good point.
Did you
All right. Well,
a
any
glue block
other
method?
quick questions before we get back to?
Yeah, is there a rule of thumb on the size of a hollow vessels when you make the shift from a regular gouge or turning tool to a boring tool?
Okay, are you just talking about handheld versus captured?
Yes.
I use the captured system all the time. for everything. Why? Control, control, control. I'm going to be in control. I'm going to do it with my fingertips. Even when I'm doing a little Christmas ornament, a lidded box is a great example of an advantage of having the boring bar system with the carbide cutter, especially to slice through the ingrained fibers of a lidded box, so you don't have to sand the bottom of a lidded box. But even in a little Christmas ornament, I use the boring bar system. Why? I could do it by hand. It's not that hard. I mean, I don't have to beat my body up too much for a small little thing. Why would I go to the effort, and it's no effort, it takes 2 minutes to put it on the lathe. Why would I go to that trouble to use a big boring bar for a little item? The laser puts me in control. I know exactly. I can make my Christmas ornaments paper thin, or very fragile and thin. I can make the wall thickness uniform so that there's no cracking issues. When you're working with wet wood, you got to make sure that it's a uniform wall thickness. Lots of things that lead me to using the boring bar system with the laser, even when I might not need it because physically I can do it. But many of us are getting up in age where we don't want to be beating our joints up, even with smaller handheld, smaller vessels. So I use it all the time for everything. It just gives me some advantages that I can't have with handheld tools.
Lyle, did you used to use a glue block method as opposed to always putting it on the faceplate?
I still do, and I always do a glue block method for bowls, unless it's huge. Then if it's a real big bowl, I'd use the screws, but I use the glue block method with CA glue. The CA glue now is very brittle. It's giving you a really solid grip between the glue block and the wood with no vibration. So I don't use the other kinds of hot melt glue and other things that can be fudgy. So it's very, very close to its efficiency. The glue block with the CA glue is very, very close to its efficiency to the faceplate, but long way away from the efficiency of a chuck. Okay, good question. So I don't use a glue block on hollow forms because it's usually ingrain. And glue doesn't work as well with ingrain. Smaller things you can do, lidded boxes and whatnot, you can do with a glue block on ingrain. But when you start to do tall things, I want the faceplate with lots of screws in it. Good question. Thank you.
I'm curious about how fine of a surface you can get with spalted wood. I know you said 320 grit with nice wet wood. I don't know if I've had more trouble with spalted wood than nice clean wood like you're using today.
Right. Spalted is the start of the decay process. And when it's spalted, it gets a color contrast, sometimes a black streak, sometimes a blotchiness of different color character going on. When the wood starts to decay, it's a short window between fresh green, good, solid wood, spalting, and decay. The spalting time is variable depending on where you're at. Spalting takes three things. It takes the moisture in the wood, it takes the spores that are already in the wood, and it takes heat. So it's not going to happen in the middle of winter up here, but and when you dry it out and finish the products or dry it out or lumber or whatever, it stops decaying and stops spalting. So it takes those three things, and there's a short window when it's good, still solid wood, but has color. And shortly after that, the color change starts to decay. It starts to rot, starts to get punky. If you've got a punkiness to it, that's where you really can't get a clean cut. But if it's just spalted and not punky, using good techniques and sharp tools is going to work just as well. It's when it gets punky that it's hard, and then you can use that cactus juice stuff or hardener, or if you've got a little tiny punky spot or a small area, you can saturate it with a thin CA glue to try to plasticize it, solidify it, so that you can cut it without it ripping up a bit. But once it gets so soft and mushy that you can't use it anymore, it's firewood. Okay, good question. All right, let's move on to hollowing. All right, let's get back to our game plan again. First thing I did, see that okay? First thing I did, I drilled a drill hole. Okay. Now we're going to start hollowing, and the first thing I'm going to do with hollowing is I'm going to make a cylindrical shaped hole in here. Okay. That cylinder is a shaving relief thing. When I'm making a cylinder, the shavings are going to roll out, and I just pull my tool back and forth like this. I don't have to stop and blow shavings out. So I can hog away a lot quicker and easier making the cylinder shape to begin with. So let's go back to here. All right, why won't my camera? I got to move my mouse back over here. There we go. Okay, let's get the hollowing system on. This big 50-pound or more tool rest is just fingertips here. I can just move this because I have a robust. Sorry, guys, I got to brag about the robust. All right, put the backrest on. Always use a safety pin. There's a safety pin that goes in the handle. If that handle ever fell out of there, we'd be in deep doo-doo. All right. All right, I got a little secret for you. Don't tell anybody. It's just between you and me, right? We're going to use a candle, paraffin, not beeswax because it's sticky, just a cheap candle. And we're going to put this wax on the tool rest, the boring bar, the handle, the backrest, every place it touches. And now it's just fingertip control is what I'm after. This is the secret to fingertip control. There's no drag and no effort to moving it. All right, let's go back to this camera. Now I'm using the Hunter carbide. Somebody asked earlier about the carbides. This is a Hunter carbide. This is the nanograin carbide. This is the sharp carbide. The other carbides don't get sharp because of the particulate. The powder that the carbide's made out of is too big of pieces. You'd have to look in a microscope to see the difference, but in action, it's much, much sharper, razor sharp compared to the old carbide particulate cutters. Now I'm doing another thing besides being sharp. I'm doing another thing. See if I can get this in the camera here. That's my shaft. It's tilted on an angle. Now, right at 12 o'clock, right the tip of my shaft, I've got a bevel supported cut there. I won't cut for pushing right towards the headstock. And then as the cut's happening, it's slicing through the fibers. So now I got two advantages. Using a sharp tool, slicing rather than scraping. And that'll give me a much, much cleaner surface, especially one of the places where it's a huge advantage is a lidded box that I mentioned before, that we have to stick our fingers in there and sand the bottom of the lidded box. Using this carbide cutter with that slicing action, the inside of a lidded box looks like it's sanded to 400 grit already. It's so cool. And I'll show you the inside of my bottom when we get it done here. But we're slicing through the fibers. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to use a scraping cut on the 9 o'clock side of that. We're going to use this as a negative rake scraper, and that's when we're undercutting shoulders or finishing up tool marks. We're going to use that negative rake scraper, so very efficient way to clean up tool marks with that area on the side of the tool. All right, so I think we're in a position there to see. The only adjustment that I have to make now, the backrest and everything is stationary and set ahead of time. The only adjustment I make is with the front tool rest. I have to be cutting on the center line, just maybe a little bit low. I'm going to bring it up just a hair. I want to be on the center line or above. Never, ever hollow below the center line. And so while I'm hogging off, I'm going to err on the side of high. I'm going to be just a hair high on the center line. The only time I need to be on the center is in the middle of the bottom with the nub, but we'll show you that when we get there. But now we're going to cut above center. Okay, let's see if I can See, we're making shavings instead of sawdust. And I think I'm going to move this over, and I think we can see that surface left behind. Let's shut it off so I hope you can see a little bit of it anyway. Or maybe I can shine a light on it better to see. And that ain't going to help either. But that surface left behind is very, very clean. And that's using the bevel supported cut that's slicing through the fibers. Let me get a close up of that again. Okay, so that's the, let me zoom back out a bit. Yep, that's the shavings that we're getting. So now the second cut we're going to do is a hog and off cut. I can really make some hay here. This little cutter, the efficiency of it, I can go really fast. So we're taking big shavings now, and now I'm going to make my cylinder.
Is your cutter at 0 degrees to the workpiece?
That vibration is the hole is not running true. So when I'm in the hole, I feel that little vibration down there from the hole not running true. All right. I don't know if we can see this very well, but we'll do it just a little bit. If I was going to finish the inside of this, I would use this 9 o'clock side of the cutter and just clean it up. Again, if you can see that, very, very clean there. All right, so those are the 3 cuts, the bevel supported cut, the hog and off cut, and the scraping cut, the negative rig scraping cut on the side. All right, so now let me go back to the drawing board. We've got our cylinder in there now. How long did that take me? We're going to go with the boring bar on an angle like this. We're going to bring the cutter up here, and with the largest diameter, we're going to make a pocket back in here, and the centrifugal force are going to take the shavings down into that pocket. When I'm working out here and measuring the wall and getting all my detail work done, the shavings are going to go back here, and I don't have to stop and blow the shavings out so often. Again, a shaving relief thing. For a little vessel like this, I probably don't even need to do that. What I don't want to do if I'm going to use this method is I don't want to make a thin wall down here. I make a thin wall down here, I'm going to vibrate out here when I start to do my measuring and work. So I want to leave this a thick walled vessel down here with support. Make sure you don't make a thin wall. So just for fun, let's do it. Yeah, let me zoom out a little bit here so you have more of a view. Okay. Settle down there, camera. Stop moving. All right, there we go. Now I'm going to have to undercut this shoulder sooner or later, and I want to get some of that mass at the largest diameter. So I'm going to swivel around on a bit of an angle. Whoops, I had my hand in front of the camera. Sorry about that. But see what I did? I swiveled it on an angle. Okay, so now I'm going to get up into that corner a little bit and just get some of the waste wood away. Make a pocket back in there. Okay. All right, we're good to go. Let's put the laser on and get some business done. Move this other camera around for a second so that you can see the laser in action. There we go. Now we got her. Okay, so now I'm looking right from the side, almost from my navel, looking at the piece of wood. And the cutter now is on an angle so I can get up into this area. I'm going to use a guide. It's usually a white card, but let me get my laser on here. I've got a black card because it works better. In fact, I'm going to shut some of the lights off here. There we go. All right. The long line now is the tangent, the area that I'm going to work with. And I got to line that up so that the long line is parallel to the territory I'm going to hollow out. The arrow line now is 90 degrees from that. So I want to set the laser on the arrow line, and the gap between the laser and the cutter is going to be my wall thickness. And so that gap has to be 90 degrees through the wall to have an accurate reading. Anytime any caliper or anything, I have to measure 90 degrees through the wall. If I get a crooked measurement, get out of the way, laser. A crooked measurement is going to give me a false reading. So I need to be 90 degrees through the wall when I'm measuring. All right, so this card helps me do that. So I'm going to line it up for here and bring it over to my cutter and set the laser on the arrow line. Let's make this, so let's try to get it maybe about 1/8 of an inch thick, about there. All right. Now, when the laser is working, the laser is a dot. You can see where I'm at. I'm all the way down into there, and it's a dot on top. And when it gets over to the sidewall, start to make a cut here. When it gets over to the sidewall, see how it gets elongated? Need to get out here a little bit. There it is. It gets elongated like that. It gives me an early warning. It says, slow down, I'm getting close. And when the laser disappears and shines down on the bed, what's it do? What do? I have to stop then because the gap's left behind and I've just measured that wall. So stop just tells me when to stop. 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 All the way out to the wastewood. Stop. Stop. Okay. Now, just with my fingertips, the laser's gone and I've measured that surface already. I'm going to clean up my tool marks. So listen with me. There's going to hear a little hiss. And you could hear a little hiss, 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 a little stronger hiss than others where there's little bumps that I went by. So I'm going to clean up those little bumps. Now, I want to make sure that I'm done with that and it's nice and clean. I only have 2 or 3 times here to clean this up. The laser's gone. Every time I clean it up, I'm making that wall thinner and thinner. So I want to be gentle and efficient with this. So let's stop and take a look. Shine a flashlight in there. I don't know if you can, no, you can't see from that angle. Could see from this one a little bit, just quickly. There, we see it's nice and clean in there. Maybe it's better without the light. I don't know. Okay. So let's pretend though I got a tool mark in there and I want to go clean it up. With the lathe off now, going to go in there. The laser's gone, so I don't have any visual cues. I have to feel it. I'm going to go back and forth across the tool mark. I go boom, 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 boom. I'm going to feel a little irregularity in there. Get a little muscle memory with my fingertips. You know, I'm only using one hand. I don't worry about the handle. The other hand I could eat a sandwich with. Sorry, I bumped the camera. And I'm going to clean up the 2 marks. So let's do it. And with that wax and the fingertip control, it's just like writing with a pencil, a curved line on a piece of paper. Really easy. All right, let's go measure some more. In here. Stop. 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 Okay. So now that second stage is measured. Now I'm going to clean up the tool marks. Transition into that first stage. And don't go back. Don't go back. When I get this first stage done, I'm perfect. I don't have any tool marks in it. I'm going to do the second stage. I'm going to transition it in, make it perfect, no tool marks in it. Don't go back. I can't go back. What's happening? This is thin. It's going to start to flex. This is thin. It's going to start to dry out. Once it dries out, it's not going to be running true. It's going to have a little bit of a wobble. And then I'm going to go back and start to pick up a tool mark I left behind. Not a good plan. Don't go back. Fix it. Prepare it now. Make it perfect. And don't go back. Okay? So let's make sure we're understanding what's happening with the laser. Let me go back to this camera and the drawing board. Second. Where's my carbide mock-up? Here it is. All right. Let's find my, there it is. Okay. Let's pretend this little red wooden mock-up bowl gouge handle thing. That's the laser light, right? And we've got the cutter that's got a gap between it. That gap is my measuring device. That gap is my little caliper, right? So now the cutter's on the inside of the vessel and the carbide's on the outside. You can see that. Yep. All right. And there's a gap between the two. That gap now has to be 90 degrees through the wall. And we're cool. We're going away. Let's start to measure. We're starting to measure. We're starting to measure. We get down here and say, uh-oh. Now what? The gap's not 90 degrees through the wall. I got to move the laser over here, right? And so we have to move the laser periodically to make sure that that gap is 90 degrees through the wall. And it's real quick and easy. It should be, I should say, it should be quick and easy and accurate to move the laser. But we've got to keep that gap 90 degrees through the wall. So let's go back to that camera. All right. Now, I'm going to skip this little corner here for a second. We've measured this. This is all done. And that was the process. Measure, measure, measure. Clean up the tool marks. Measure, measure, measure. Clean up the tool marks. Don't go back. Now I'm going to skip over and I'm going to start to measure here. I'm going to skip that little corner. So now we need the laser to be lined up on the arrow line, 90 degrees through the wall. So bring that over here. Aha, look at there. The laser's not on the arrow line. That would be trouble. So let's move it over here on the arrow line so that that gap is 90 degrees through the wall. Oop. Bumped it. Okay. So now let's go measure down in here. I got to get some of the waste wood out from behind a little bit. I'll see how elongated that is. So now it's going to start to get close. Make the laser disappear. There it is. That's measured. Stop. 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 Okay. Now that's my largest diameter, and all those shavings are fighting me in here a little bit, so I'm going to stop, blow the shavings out. And then we'll clean up the tool marks just with your fingertips again. Go from here. Hear the little hisses of the high spots? Clean up the tool marks. All right, now what happened is I ignored that little corner. So this is done here, and this is done here. So I don't want to go back there, but I'm going to get that little corner. If you see, probably you should see a little laser bump. Well, yes, I can feel it. You really can't see the laser, doesn't jump too much, but there's a little bump in there, and I'm just going to transition in between this and that, just with my fingertips. Clean up that little corner. Let me double check. Oh yeah, that'll work. Got a little bit of a mark just below the corner though, so I'm just going to take one more little cleanup right in here. All right, so now I want to get down into here. Now that I'm done moving around that corner, I'm going to swivel my swivel, straighten it out a little bit. Ah, now wait a minute. I moved my swivel. What happened to my gap? What happened to the laser? We got to reset it. So let's reset the laser. See, now the laser's nowhere near the arrow. Okay. Now let's finish off that last little bit in the bottom. I'm cutting there. And that's where I'm done with my last stage. Stop. 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 Clean up the tool marks. Measure, measure, measure. Clean up the tool marks. Yep, shavings are fighting me. Hear the little hissing bumps in there. So I'd look in there, see, make sure there's no tool marks in here. I'm going to skip by and not really pay too much attention with that, with finishing that. My goal here is to get through all the pieces of the puzzle, not a perfect vessel I can put on my mantle and admire here. So now let's go back to stage 3. I'll go back to the overhead camera again. Come on, camera, cooperate. All right, so we're back to this one. I need to zoom out a little bit so you can see my tool rest. All right, so we're done with stage 1 and stage 2. Now we're going to come down and do stage 3 down the outside here. So we're going to go back, take my boring bar off the lathe. I'm going to leave the backrest on. That's not in my way back there. Grab my face shield. Now I don't need all this mess. And if you noticed, I didn't even clean it up. There's bark and wobble. Well, we're not seeing that whole thing here. So let's zoom out a little bit more. Maybe that'll do it. There we go. So there's wobble and bark and everything in here. I didn't even clean it up. I left it for support. All right, let's get rid of some of this junk. Don't need it. Now the water's spraying on my face shield now. Right into the side grain again. I know my screws are still way up here, so I'm not worried about my screws. All right, I'm gonna go downhill to the fibers now when I start to make the shape. Yeah, it's a little bit flat there. I'm gonna tuck that in just a little bit more. Gotta swing my hand a little bit faster down in here. There we go. Make a little nice curved surface there. All right, so now I'd stop and clean these tool marks off. I do the shear scraping, get it real, refine this line, make it perfect. I don't think I better stop and look and make sure I didn't reveal something crazy going on. No, it's just solid wood. Okay, so I'd clean that all up, be done with the outside because I'm not going back afterwards. And let's go back and finish hollowing that bottom quadrant. There we go. Okay, I'm from the side view camera again. Okay. Now, always check the laser often. Make sure I'm down in here now. So let's just make sure my laser's set. And I guess while I'm down in there too, I can actually put that swivel around a little bit more. I'm going to point the swivel right directly straight parallel to the boring bar or straight towards the headstock. And reset the laser again. Use the card. Straight line here. Bring it over to the laser. See, it's not on the line. Keep it about 1/8 of an inch. Okay. Now let's go get this bottom quadrant. My goal here to do 2 things. I want the drill hole to go away. Where's my drill hole? Whew, maybe it's already gone. Let me check in here. I can't feel it unless maybe oh, I'm still a little bit high. That's why. I believe I'm high. Yeah. When I raised it up a bit to do the outside stage, now I wasn't on the center line. There's not much of a drill hole left there. There's just a little bit of a remnant. You feel see the laser bouncing a little bit when I'm in the hole. So I want to do 2 things. I want the drill hole to go away, and that's pretty much done. There's just a little tiny remnants of a drill hole, and I want the sidewall to be done all the way down. It's done there. So let me finish the rest of that bottom. Stop. 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 Clean up the toe marks. All right. So those 2 things are done. The drill hole is gone and the sidewall is done. Now we're going to do 2 things differently now. I need to get dead on the center line. If I'm too high, it's going to fight me. The wood's going that way. Instead of cutting, it's pushing me. And so it'll bump around if I'm too high. Even a hair too high, it's got to be perfect. If I'm too low, it's going to leave a cylinder there that I never touched. So I need to get dead on the center line. Show you how I'm going to do that. And the second thing we're going to do, I think it's here. Yeah, here it is I'm going to reset the laser now with no gap. And this is so cool in the bottom here because I can see exactly where I am, how deep I am, and I can even see the shape develop by watching the laser. There's no other way, no other tools in the world that'll measure through the waste wood. So I know exactly where I'm at if I set the laser with no gap. Okay, so let's go do those 2 things. let's use the overhead camera for this, I think. Here we go. Yeah, maybe not. Okay. So first thing we're going to do, set the laser with no gap. Okay. And while we're thinking about that, let's make a register. Let's make a mark. Let's find out where we're at. There's my bottom. I know exactly how deep I am. There's no guesswork. I know exactly where I'm at, right? Second thing I need to do is get on the center line. So with the lathe off now, I'm going to scratch a line across the bottom. Yep, still have a little bump in there. There's a little remnant of my drill hole. Then I'll take a flashlight and look in there. Whoa, I'm quite a bit high. I'm a good 1/8 of an inch high. Okay, so if we look down here, I've got a threaded rod tool post. The threaded rod is a 1 inch by 8 threads per inch. So I'm going to have to move that up 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to move this nut 1/8 of an inch, or one rotation is going to be 1/8 of an inch. And I want to move it down. Okay, scratch a line again. Oh, that feels better. Look with my flashlight. I might have got it. Now I'll know in a second when I start to make a cut. All right. So I did two things: reset the laser and got on the center line. Let me feel. Whoop, get back up here. Let me feel where we're at in there. Okay, I'm going to start the cut on the right-hand side of center. The right-hand side of center, the wood's going up, nothing happens. And I'm going to slowly bring it across the center line. You're going to start to hear a little hiss. I think you can hear it with me. There's a hiss. Hiss. See the laser going back and forth? Okay. Take another look. I think I'm good. No, I've got just a little bit of a nub there. I think, let me scratch a line and figure out which way I'm going. I think I'm a little bit high. But it's cutting really nicely, but there's just a very, very tiny, tiny remnants of a little, yep, I'm just a hair high. So I'm going to again move my threaded nut, maybe just 1/8 of a turn here, and get on the center line. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Now we're cranking. Okay. So I went down there. So now look where I'm at. Can we see on my overhead? I think so. The laser kind of gets in the way here, but you can see where I'm at now and where I started. Now watch what happens when I move the cutter across the bottom. That's the bottom area. And I move the cutter across the bottom. Whoop. You see how it goes from here up to here? Uh-oh, broke my pencil. From here up to here. Watch the laser again. Okay, so this is so cool. I can see the shape and the depth of my bottom really nice here. Now, I don't want to come over here. This is all done, right? I think you can see that by my laser's in the way of the camera here, but I'm not going to cut up here. I'm only going to clean that little bottom up. Now, when I turn the lathe on, we won't be able to see the pencil, but you can still see the shape in there by watching the laser. See the bump? So I'm just going to work on that bump, get that little bump, go away. Now I'm hearing a little hiss up here on the sidewall. I'm not cutting there, just very lightly transitioning in across the bottom. Take a flashlight, see how I did. Ooh, well, you know what happened? I've got a little toothpick tip sticking out of the bottom. Now I got my tool rest just a hair too low. And so I'm going to have to, that's not good to see it from there. Let me get the other camera on. So I'm just a hair too low and left a little, probably not worth fiddling with, but because I can, I am. I'm going to raise that just up, maybe a 32nd of an inch with my threaded tool rod post. And let's take another little quick pass across the bottom, and that little toothpick will go away. No, made it smaller, but it didn't go away yet. So I need to go up just a hair more. Now I think I got it. Woo, live with that. All right. There was a question about cleaning up the bottom of the end grain. I think I've covered that. Why is that so clean in there? One thing, I'm using sharp tools. The other thing, I'm slicing through the fibers instead of scraping. And so those two elements are key to dealing with torn out grain in end grain especially. But the same thing happens in a bowl format when you've got side grain vessels. You still get torn out grain if you're using dull tools or if you're scraping. And so I don't do either in a bowl or a hollow form. Using sharp tools on a slicing action means that I don't have to sand so much and the surface looks better right off the tool. Okay, did I answer the question for the person that was asking during the break?
Yes, you did, Lyle.
Great. Okay, cool. All right, so now I got stages 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to take this off and do reverse chucking. Here's a exciting part. Here's where the fun starts, or I think can help a lot of people. Whoop, sorry about that. Don't want to move the camera while it's on. I'll go back to my overhead view. All right. Strong word, hate parting tools. Parting tools is usually used in scraping mode, and it's going to rip stuff up, and I'm going to have end grain left behind here. That's going to be pretty ugly. So I don't want to use a parting tool if this is where it's going to sit on the table right here. I don't want to use a parting tool to cut this off and then have to sand all of that damage. So I'm going to part it off way up above there, give myself a quarter inch or so of waste wood here, and part it off up above. You're really in that camera angle, you really can't see the kerf here, but I'm going to go down to a relatively small little diameter here. And I'm not even going to part it off all the way with the parting tool. Because again, I don't want to tear it up. I want to take a little pocket of shavings out of that little center area. It can be really stressful. So I'm going to cut it off. All right. So now see what I would have to sand, all this torn out stuff. Ugly. I don't want to do that. And what this does is give me a little target, okay, that I can put it back on the lathe with. Let's talk about reverse chucking a second. There's lots of different ways to put this back on the lathe. Most of them have, back to my limits and obstacles again, most of them have limits on what they can do. Let's talk about a few of them. Let's say vacuum chuck, right? I could use a vacuum chuck here, it'd be great, fine. But what if it's got a void in it? Can't use a vacuum chuck. What about the coal jaws in the big ring of chucks and the little rubber bung things? Okay. What if I've got a natural edge? What if it's a bowl and it's warped so badly that it won't seat? What if it's paper thin? I don't want to crush it. Lots of obstacles. Same thing with the little donut things that you can use to try to hold something. People go to great expense and great time and effort to put this back on the lathe without the tailstock. I choose to use the tailstock with a friction drive way to hang onto the wood, not ever a true jam chuck that I'm going to be able to take the tailstock away. I'm always going to have the tailstock there. The good news about this method, there's nothing in the world that I can't put back on the lathe. That's a pretty big statement. Doesn't matter what is involved with it. Thin, thick, warped, voids, natural edges, doesn't matter. Multi-axis, doesn't matter. With this friction drive method, I can put it back on the lathe. What's the bad news? The bad news is I'm going to end up with a little nub on the bottom that I'm going to carve away by hand. That little nub is going to be easy and quick. Carve it off, grind it off, sand it off, whittle it off, whatever. Just takes just a few minutes to do that and sand that little nub on the bottom. So that's a small price to pay to be able to use a method that's universal. I don't need a bunch of other tools, and I don't have to deal with the limitations of those other tools. So I'm going to prepare a race here, or a tenon, a recess that my rim will sit into, and bring my tailstock up and hold it with a friction drive. Anytime I hold something, I'm always going to, in a hollow form vessel format, I'm always going to hold it on the outside. I'm never going to put anything on the inside and risk cracking it, okay? I'm always going to grab it on the outside. So I'm going to make a recess here that's, it can be sloppy. It doesn't have to even be close because it's going to shoulder here, and it doesn't need to be running perfectly true, because I'm not going back here. This is all done. Remember, don't go back. So I'm going to drive with the friction of this, and it's going to really almost self-center itself once I bring my tailstock up to ride on the recess. What if I've got a natural edge? What if I've got voids and things in here, right? I always use a capture on the outside. I've got a whole bunch of these that I've made out of some scrap wood. Some of them have pads that I've taped on here. And now I would bring this up and hold it, capturing it on the outside as a donut, right? I capture it on the outside and bring my tailstock up. Now, this is a little reveal here. I'm going to show you something, but it's a secret, right? Don't tell anybody. If this gets out, I'll deny it. Oh, I'm using a chuck. Oh, no. But what am I using it for? To hold a waste block. I'm never using it to turn with. So I have a bunch of these things around that I can put back on the lathe and use different sizes, different shapes to hold different kinds of vessels, okay? All right, so what camera are we on? Let's get here. Don't need my saw.
Lyle, what was the material on that? Was that fabric or rubber?
That was a piece of cloth, the one that I just showed you. But I've used Leather is good. If you get a nice thick piece of leather, that's a good transfer medium. Anything will do. An old mouse pad, some rubber, some. When I'm traveling and I don't have stuff with me, or I forgot some of my things, or I'm doing something special that I have to create something new, I'll just take a few thicknesses of paper towel. You know, it's all you really need, some way to protect it so that it's you have a good friction drive, but you're not damaging the wood. And you want to have a soft landing, not have a sharp corner where the two surfaces meet. Okay, good question. Thank you. So
Thank you.
let's go back to my overhead here, and I'm just going to use a parting tool to, how big do I have to make it? About that big, okay. In fact, we got a big hunk of junk sticking out there. I'm going to take my bowl gouge and whip that off of there first. Now, the most important part of that is the bottom, not the radius or the diameter. I think I'm too small. Yep, a little bit too small yet. When it's got a nice clean bottom, that's where it's going to shoulder. All right. It's close, but I am shouldering. See how it wants to shoulder right out. So now I'm going to bring the tailstock up. Let me move this other stuff out of the way. Take my backrest off. All right, we're running out of time here. I wanted to try to end at noon. There's one thing that I like to do is the Robust Live Center has a big hunkin' 3/8 inch pin here with a set screw. I can bring that out, and it mimics the same thing that we usually have with our one-way cones. Never use these cones or that single point for roughing out and for most of the work. I only do it for reversing when things are delicate. This is not strong enough, not safe to do hogging off stuff with. So if you've got one of these, make sure to take it off when you're doing the other kinds of work. But Robust here has a big 3/8 inch pin in it that I can stick out, and it has the same 60-degree angle, but it gets out here where I can have better access to it. But it'd take me a second just to adjust that. But so I'm going to take a shortcut here and use the other cone just for time issues. All right. Bring that in there. Now remember, I have a little target, a little dimple in there from my cutting it off with the saw. So I can tell pretty much where center is. But let's test it. I'm going to put my thumb here and roll it around. Whoo, I'm right on. It doesn't matter because I'm not going back here anyway, but I want it to run fairly true. If it wobbles a little bit, if it's dry, if you've taken time to let this dry out, I don't know if you can see it, how wet it is. If you take time to let it dry out, you can sand it before you reverse it, or you can sand it now. But all right, let's get this. Now, how tight do I tighten it? I want to tighten it so it won't move. Just a little quarter turn at a time, just gently sneak up on here. I'm going to take small cuts and light cuts, so I'm not going to tax it very much. Gently. Oh no, where's the bottom? What if I make a donut? I know exactly where the bottom is, don't I? No worries. All right, let's make this tenon just a little bit smaller. And I've done the outside is all done before. All I'm working on is this bottom inside. So I want to make that a little bit concave. I could stop right now and be done with the bowl gouge. That's everything that I've used for the outside of it. But I'm going to take a spindle gouge now. I like to make some little detail in the bottom of my vessels just to show that it's been turned down there and not sand it off with a disc sander or something. So I'm going to roll a little bead. Let me move the camera over so you can see a little better. There we go. I'm just going to roll a little bead here. Bevel first, anchor bevel cut. Pick up my cut. There's a little whisk of a shaving. Roll. Push the handle away from me. Roll so that the cut is almost straight up and down at the end. Okay. Now when I'm doing that, what it does is it kind of fuzzes up the inside of that little recess. So I'm going to come back with the flute pointing the other direction now and clean up the back side of that little bead. Okay, be done. Okay. Now we have just a little shoulder in there and a little concave surface so it sits on the table nice, and a little about half-inch little tenon that I have to carve away by hand. Let's go back to this camera. We'll get you a view of the inside. All right, see how clean that is? Nice and clean. Okay. All right, we made it. It's not quite noon and we made it. We didn't have a whole lot of questions. Anybody interrupted me here, but let's try open it up now again. Any topic you want to talk about, we can take it on for a minute. People can come and go if they want to leave, but
I'd like to know how accurate do you have to set the backrest? I mean, can you just eyeball it to be horizontal, or do you have to like
No. That's really specific. You have to be. I have really specific installation instructions when you get my system to set it up correctly. That's critical. The backrest support and the orientation of the cutter is critical to making it work right. My system, the way that I have it set up, you can't get a catch. As long as you always cut above the center line, it's impossible to get a catch in there, and it's because of the setup. Everything has to be set up correctly. It's not perfectly parallel to the floor, but it's damn close. But you just have to follow the instructions. If anybody has their own system, they have somebody that made their own or one of my competitor systems. If you go on my website and you look at my installation instructions, it'll show you how to set yours up like mine. You know, you don't have to buy mine to work on it that way, but it's really important to have everything set up correctly. Any other questions?
I have a question also. If you compare the surface quality with a HSS bit, that like a standard steel tool bit with a burr on it.
The high-speed steel cutter is going to do a good job. I've used it for years. It was been the go-to thing for decades. It's much better than the old carbide. The high-speed steel will give you a better surface than the old carbide will. The easy tools and those kinds of things. The Hunter is a whole different ballgame. The nanograin carbide and the slicing action of the carbide is even better than the high-speed steel. But the high-speed steel is acceptable. You know, there's still a lot of people using that. I give it away with my boring bar, the basic package, because that's what's been used for decades, and the carbide cutter is an accessory. I hope I answered that question. I kind of got off track.
Can you buy the hunter carbides, like say from different venues?
No, buy it from me. Mike Hunter makes it for me under my specifications. Most of the people using carbide, even the Hunter carbide, and there's a lot of people, and it's very well respected. The handheld tools with the Hunter carbide on it are great. But I have him make it under my specs for this system. You have to get it from me. They're not in catalogs. You can't get it anyplace else. The replacement cutters of the carbides are only $20, so it's a very economical way to turn also, because it's going to last a long, long time. In fact, the carbide cutter lasts so long that it works very, very well even after it starts to deteriorate. So it's a great economical tool.
So you can put it in different manufacturers' tool holders?
Well, I'm using the Hunter number 1. If you have other tools that'll carry the Hunter number 1, there's, I don't know, I don't want to make a sales pitch here, but there's lots of different manufacturers that are handling carbide cutters. Most of them are the old carbide, the larger particulate carbide that aren't very sharp, and are usually using them in scraping mode. And what happens is that those old carbide cutters, you can buy a pack of 12 of them for $5. They're cheap, but they're not very sharp, and they don't work very well. And another thing is that their holding methods aren't real accurate. Mike Hunter and I are using a torque screw that is a tapered machine screw to hold our carbide cutter in place. And that precision is really important. Carbide is brittle, and it could crack or break when you're putting in stresses, and you need to hold it efficiently. Just that little screw, it looks about the thickness of a toothpick, cost me $6 for that little tiny screw. It's that important that we're taking it to the extra mile and holding it with the most efficient way. The inside of the carbide is machined to match the outside of the screw, so that they have a good mating surface. So with home built tools and the other things that are just put together cheaply, you're not getting that precision, as well as you're not getting that quality of a tool.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no other questions, I want to give a couple things. My thanks to Joe and Ron, the two people that I've worked with, but I'm sure there's boards and other people behind the scenes that have made this possible and made it successful for you. It's a great way to get information and share my techniques with you. Thank you, and glad to do it. Two things I would want your help with is just to get some publicity out there. Other clubs are on the fence of things that, I don't know if I want to do this technology thing or whatever. So if you have any Facebook or forums or anything that you can share your experiences with, so that they see that this is a good thing. Or if you see anything bad with it, let me know, or put that out too. But publicize your opinions on that and get the word out. We're just in the early stages of this, of seeing what this Zoom thing will do. I've started doing it with individuals now instead of just clubs, so people can go on my website and buy a demo just for $10. So there's lots of people that are in the turning world that aren't involved with AAW or clubs. So we're trying to reach everybody to help them out. So share the good news, and we can come back again another time. My club has dedicated to doing this 3 times a year. Even when we get back to meeting, we're probably going to be doing this when we're meeting face to face. This is such a a nice way to go to sit back in your easy chair. And I had some comments from a couple nights ago where one of the guys said, "Oh, I haven't been able to hear, I haven't been able to see, sitting even in the front row, with my hearing and everything. Now I can see and I can hear you. This is a whole new ball game. Thank you, thank you." I get all kinds of raving reviews from people that love to have the broadcast into their houses. So I don't think this is going to ever end. It's going to go on. One more thing, I guess. I don't know how many people have left. Yeah, we're still got about 60 on. Sorry, I didn't say it earlier. If anybody wants to buy any of my tools, I have a 10% discount for you because of the club event. You have to call me. Can't go to the website because my website doesn't do discounts. I don't usually give discounts. But give me a call if you need any tools that I have, and I'll give you a 10% discount. Just refer to the meeting, and we'll give you a little break on that. Other than that, just thank you. Appreciate been nice being here.
Lyle, I have one more question, please.
Yes, go ahead.
If you had a vase that was quite a bit taller than the one you did today and with a smaller entry hole, maybe you can't see to the bottom to see your scratches for fine tuning the bottom, the tool height or the tool position at the bottom. How do you handle that?
Okay, the height doesn't matter to be able to see the bottom. To scratch a line across the bottom and get your center height, you can see in the hole no matter how small it is. So that's not a problem. The problem with going deeper is that you can exceed the limits. The 3/4 inch boring bar has been the go-to boring bar for decades because it gets into a relatively small mouth opening and still can reach a reasonably sized vessel, 10, 11, 12 inch tall vessel. But if you want to go bigger than that, you need to have a bigger bar. You need to have a stronger bar. The undercut shoulder thing, it's important to, when you're going into a small entry hole, the boring bar system has to have a way to reach different places, and you can get in as your skill level grows. You start to explore some more complex shapes, and you need to have a system that will reach any place. And that's why I have the swivel assembly, and that's why I have 3 different reach capabilities. I got straight in that I was using today, I've got a little bend, and I've got a big bend that will get into any places that you want to go. With others, and that's all with one boring bar. With other systems, you got to buy 3 or 4 different boring bars, and you still have some limits that you can't reach. Just you do find, and there's one little place that you just can't reach, and it drives you crazy. So you have to have a system. What happens is that with the small hole, entry hole, the boring bar has to be relatively straight into the hole. When the boring bar starts to get crooked, it has to be a bigger hole. So the boring bar gets straight into a hole. The cutter has to do the reach over to the side to get the shoulders and the bulbous shapes. So the reach configurations are important, and the swivel assembly is the first attack to that. That's really important. Did that answer the question?
Yes, I guess I still had some trouble. Certain types of wood, you can't see the scratch at the bottom. I just had trouble, especially it's kind of dark. The flashlight is adequate, but not great. Just hard to see the scratch through the grain patterns.
Yeah. Twist the vessel 90 degrees so that the scratch shows up better. Sometimes if it's going with the grain, it won't show up, and against the grain, it'll show up a little bit. Get a stronger flashlight. Get a flashlight that has the little, whatever they call it, little wire hook kind of extension to the flashlight.
Gooseneck.
A gooseneck cutter. Even Cindy's little, you stick that on the inside of a hollow form. Okay, Cindy's little light, and you can see in there. Just take it on a little shaft of some kind. Find a way. You got to be able to see where you're at in the bottom. You can feel if it's not on center, but you really can't tell too much until you start to make a cut and you realize, oh, I'm not on center. Am I up or am I down? Which way do I go? Scratch another line. You got to be able to see that line someplace. It doesn't matter how far you are away from it. You can be 2 feet away. You can still see that line. So find a way. There is a way. Better light would help probably. But that's the only way that I know of to get on the center line. You can't measure. And people will try to measure. They'll put some kind of a block on their tool rest that says, okay, this is on the center line. Well, that works for a 5-inch tall vessel, but when it's 12 inches, it's a moving target. Things aren't never going to line up perfectly from vessel to vessel. So it's something you have to adjust every time you get down where the drill hole's gone. You have to adjust to get on that center line. And you got to find a way to see and scratch that line and see where you're at. Good question. That's something